Hello and welcome to the View with Hasan Ali. Tonight we turn our attention to a figure whose name once dominated Pakistan's political landscape, but who seems to have receded from the public discourse. I'm speaking about PMLN Supremo and three-time former Prime Minister Mian Nawaz Sharif. From 3 aborted terms as the country's CEO to years of exile, courtroom battles, and unexpected comebacks, Sharif's story is woven into Pakistan's history. But as the country faces new challenges and shifting power dynamics, where does Nawaz Sharif truly stand in the national memory? Is he a sideline statesman or an enduring force waiting for his moment to re-emerge from the shadows? We unpack the legacy, the controversies, and the question of what or who Pakistan may be forgetting. And joining me on this episode is the political analyst Shuja Nawaz. Mr. Nawaz was the founding director of the South Asia Center of the Atlantic Council in Washington, D.C., where he was a distinguished fellow from 2014 to 25. He's written prolifically about Pakistan's history and challenges and is currently writing a book about Bangladeshi independence. Mr. Nawaz, good to be with you.
Thank you, Hasan Ali. Good to be with you.
So it was our observation that discussions of prominent political figures in Pakistan tend to occur in an atmosphere of hyper-partisanship. And so therefore, one doesn't really get very much information. It's all sort of, like very shouty, screamy. We wanted to rectify that by doing a more dispassionate show on the legacy of Nawaz Sharif, clearly a really important figure in Pakistan's history. And with that in mind, I wanted to ask you when you first became aware of the man.
Well, I was aware of him from his early days, particularly once he joined the cabinet of the Punjab government, because I had been researching and following the relationship between the military and the political system in Pakistan over the years. Which eventually led to my first book, Crossed Swords. And it was quite clear that the origins of Mr. Sharif's entry into politics was orchestrated by the former Director General of the ISI, Lieutenant General Ghulam Jalani, who was governor of in the Punjab when he identified him as a potential candidate to run for elections, and he was elected to the provincial assembly. And then Jalani suggested to General Ziaul Haq that he should be made the finance minister of the Punjab. So that was his first rise to public recognition. He had no background in politics. It was not clear if he had any active interest in politics before he was selected for that role.
What qualities do you think the military saw in him?
They were looking for alternatives to the traditional politics. And it is quite clear that Ziaul Haq wanted political legitimacy and constitutional legitimacy. And for that, he needed people in government in the provinces as well as in the Majlis-e-Shura that would support him. And so if you look at the galaxy of Pakistani politicians today, almost all of them had their beginnings in that famous Majlis-e-Shura, regardless of which political party that belong to today. And a number of them have changed political parties over the years, which is a characteristic of Pakistani politics. It should be said, and I want to say this at the outset, that Nawaz Sharif probably is one of the most consequential politicians in Pakistani history, not just because of the length and breadth of his service at the highest levels in Pakistan, but also because he has represented a change in the original system of politics, which was led by feudal landlords, and obviously with the help of the military at times. So he was one of the first urban politicians to have been selected. He belonged to the grand bourgeoisie, so the upper middle class, conservative background, not very religious in a ritualistic sense, but enough to meet the requirements of Ziaul Haq and his cohorts.
And this puts him sort of in opposition to the other leading political figure of that period, Benazir Bhutto, right? If you could perhaps spell out for us some of, you've already done this, but some of the differences between them and how he was an effective antidote, as it were, to Benazir.
Well, Benazir Bhutto was an extremely courageous politician. She entered politics as a young woman. She was forced into entering politics as a young woman because her brother had gone into exile. Murtaza Bhutto had gone into exile, and she picked up the mantle of her late father, with whom she was very close. It's not clear if Zulfikar Ali Bhutto had survived and remained as Prime Minister or President of Pakistan for a long time, who his successor would have been. I have no doubt that that would have been another dynasty. But as it turned out, he did create a dynasty through his daughter. She was less of a socialist than he was, at least on paper. He tried to sell the idea of Islamic socialism. She did not fall into that trap. And so she was a mainstream politician who worked very hard against the dictatorship of the time with a great deal of threat to her own life. And as you know, she was elected after the death of General Ziaul Haq, despite the opposition of the military. And then the DGISI at that time, Hamid Gul, is reported to have cobbled together the Islami Jamhuri Ittihad, and Nawaz Sharif started playing a key role in that. This was disclosed to me, and I've reported it in my book also by Ambassador Bob Oakley, who was the US ambassador in keeping close tabs on everything that was happening in the country. And then, of course, when Benazir was removed from office, Nawaz Sharif won a decisive victory and came into power as the prime minister. But he also was removed by Ghulam Ishaq Khan. So he's had run-ins with the establishment, whether it was the military directly or the military and the president that were part of the two legs of the troika that ran Pakistan in those early days.
Mr. Nawaz, could you, if we look at that period, the 90s, the late 80s, up until General Musharraf seized power in a coup in October 1999, if we look at that period in Pakistani politics, the PMLN versus the PPP, what were the ideological dividing lines for voters?
This was not very clear. It was a bit of twiddle-dee and twiddle-dum in Pakistani politics. There were manifestos issued, but nobody paid attention to them once they were elected. So it was basically a spoils game where you came into power and then you basically tried to recover what you had spent on getting into power and more. Nawaz Sharif did have some broad ideas, and I think we should give him credit for that. Because of his business background, he tried a number of times to open the relationship with India, particularly for trade. And not only he, but later on his younger brother, Shahbaz Sharif, when he was the chief minister of the Punjab, had a kind of bilateral relationship between Indian Punjab and the Pakistani Punjab, and would regularly receive visitors from the Indian Punjab and deal with businessmen. So there was, I think, at least one far-sighted element to their politics. The only problem that emerged over time was that Mr. Nawaz Sharif fell into the same trap of creating a dynastic political system of control over his party, even though he attracted some very good and brilliant people who were very hardworking and served him, and many of them are still serving the PMLN till today. I'm thinking of people like Ahsan Iqbal, for instance. They were never allowed to take over the leadership. And so both Shahbaz Sharif and Nawaz Sharif tried to groom their progeny. And
Yeah.
so I think even now, although your intro seemed to indicate that Nawaz Sharif was out of Pakistani politics, he is very much the eminence grise, sitting in London, exercising control over key decisions. And so whenever Shahbaz Sharif has to make a key decision, he heads to London on one excuse or the other. If you remember, one of the key decisions that was made was at the time when the selection of General Asim Munir
Yes, of
came
course.
into effect. That was a no-brainer in terms of the PMLN, because Asim Munir had differences with Prime Minister Imran Khan over a number of issues, including foreign policy issues that were not brought into the public eye, but that clearly irked Imran Khan enough that he asked for him to be removed. And General Bajwa played both sides of the wickets by removing him, but giving him an important position as a corps commander. And so when the time came for the end of the second term of General Bajwa, obviously the senior most general available to the Sharifs was General Asim Munir. So they didn't do anything unusual in selecting him, but they certainly bought out an extended insurance policy against Imran Khan or any other political figure in the parliament at that time.
It's thought that as a politician, Nawaz Sharif has always been wedded to the idea of the political leader as a distributor of patronage, almost like a Mughal emperor who bestows gifts and privileges on his courtiers and thereby keeps them loyal. Is that an accurate characterization?
Well, that's the political ecosystem of Pakistan, and it's not just Nawaz Sharif. You can go back to Ayub Khan's days. He also doled out privileges and entitlements to people that he supported. It was only in the early days of Pakistan, and unfortunately, Mr. Jinnah died within a year of creating this homeland. So he never really got to govern Pakistan, and his prime minister was assassinated, and that assassination was never fully resolved or solved. So we have to begin with Ayub Khan, who learned very quickly that politics is transactional. And the way to get people on board is to give them entitlements and privileges. And so he began that process, although he kept it largely to the civilians. Later leaders, particularly in the military, extended it to the military itself. But Ayub Khan came up with the idea of basic democracies, if you remember, which was a much more manageable group of people, much like the Majlis-e-Shura of General Ziaul Haq later, whom he could control easily. It was much more manageable than the whole population of Pakistan. And so he relied on local potentates, his feudal partners in the Punjab, in Sindh, as well as Balochistan and in the then frontier province. And so that pattern has continued. And Nawaz Sharif obviously found this extremely valuable as a tool for garnering support. There is one thing I should mention, and he will bear some responsibility for this in Pakistani history. It was during his term as prime minister that the first bill that was passed against horse trading in parliament. You know how that happens.
Right.
Previously, parliament was like parliament anywhere, where the elected representatives voted their conscience or voted for whoever paid them the most behind the scenes. In order to stop that, Nawaz Sharif proposed, and interestingly, all the political parties agreed to the idea that anyone who voted against his or her party line would give up their seat and have to run for re-election under some other banner. And so that became a tight control. It was a kind of a Soviet type control over parliament in Pakistan. And it eliminated the desires and the wishes of the constituents who had elected that individual to parliament. So I think that will remain a negative point in the balance of his accounts politically.
It's also thought that Sharif's choice of military chiefs has reflected a tendency to want to engineer things so as to get his own man at the top. And yet all his military appointments seem to have come back to haunt him. Why do you think that is?
I think initially it was a lack of understanding of how the military functions, and not just Nawaz Sharif. Even Benazir Bhutto did not really fully understand how the military functioned, how decisions were made, how it was organized, how disciplined it was, and how narrow and steep the pyramid of authority was within the military. I remember my own conversations with her, many conversations in which she used to grill me about all of this. And I was surprised that she didn't know all this or hadn't studied it at length. And the problem often was because both she and Nawaz Sharif would find their military secretaries and co-opt them and rely on them for guidance. And they were often as peeved at the military leadership as Nawaz Sharif was. And so he got bad intelligence, he got bad information, which spoiled the relationship between the military and himself. This happened all the time that he was prime minister. I remember the time when my brother was selected as prime minister. That was the time of the continuation of the so-called Troika. And I asked Prime Minister Sharif if he had made a recommendation to the president, because that was the constitutional requirement. And his response to me in the interview in London that he gave me was, he said, I never got to making the recommendation. Ghulam Ishaq Khan had made up his own mind, and he selected General Asif Nawaz. So there was clearly a tension in that relationship. Also, as I said, lack of understanding, not just of the individuals, but also of the institution. And so, for instance, during that period, there were messages being sent through third parties saying, "Kuch hamare jarnal bhi hone chahiye," meaning that people whose families or tribes are aligned with our political party. That is not the way of the military, and it shouldn't be, because it harms the military structure, it harms its discipline. And the more you involve the military in politics, the harder it becomes to then control them. I'll give you another example of this. In my interview with him in London after he'd come back from Saudi Arabia, I asked him if he was aware of the warrant of precedence. And he said he didn't know about it. So I explained that it was a rank order in which all the people in power in the country were assigned a level. And that at the time of independence, obviously the military chiefs, the service chiefs were way below. And I explained to him that Bangladesh had restored the warrant of precedence to the time of independence. And so I said in India also, the army chiefs, the naval chief and the air chief are at number 12. Whereas in Pakistan, the civilian authorities have basically tried to win over the military by promoting the military positions over time. And I said, under your own prime ministership, this has happened a number of times. And he was very surprised that it happened, but obviously it was to his advantage that it happened, because it brought him closer to the military. And it was a way of, quote unquote, buying support from the military. So that was another thing that he was made aware of at least by me, and I'm sure by his own people, but he may not have remembered.
That's interesting. It's interesting that you say he may not have remembered, and it sort of leads into my next question. In your personal dealings with Nawaz Sharif, observing him closely, interviewing him, speaking to him, what did you make of him? I mean, what is your assessment of his strengths and also his weaknesses?
Well, first of all, I had very little direct dealings with him. I observed him from a distance. I used to follow his activities, and I would travel to Pakistan almost every year, sometimes a number of times every year. So I was aware of what was going on. So I have to say that my personal dealings with him were very limited. But from what I saw a man who obviously was growing into the job. He had learned a lot about politics and management. I also saw a man who delegated a lot. And sometimes it appears that he delegated the obnoxious tasks to other people because he didn't want to confront people themselves. And a good
Can you give me an
instance
example of these obnoxious tasks?
Yes. Well, for instance, when General Jahangir Karamat made his famous speech at the Naval Staff College asking that the military be part of the National Security Council, this created a little bit of a kerfuffle in Parliament, and parliamentarians were saying, hey, what's going on? And obviously, Nawaz Sharif himself didn't think that this was something desirable. And so the conversation that they had was very interesting, where Nawaz Sharif kept saying that I am facing problems from within the party and in Parliament. And General Karamat, in a moment of weakness, offered that maybe the way to do it is for him to step down. And suddenly, according to General Karamat, Nawaz Sharif's demeanor entirely changed, as if a weight had been lifted from his shoulder. He wasn't going to ask for Karamat's resignation. In fact, when I interviewed him in London, I asked him point blank if he had asked for his resignation. He said no, which was quite correct. It was confirmed by General Karamat too, that the latter had suggested it. Similarly, he would delegate things to Brigadier Imtiaz, who had experience in the MI and the ISI and could manipulate things on his behalf. But there was a very interesting episode that was narrated to me by the DG ISI, Lieutenant General Javed Nasir, who said to me, when I interviewed him, that he had some videos of Benazir Bhutto. And this is something that unfortunately our intelligence agencies have been doing over the years, trying to find compromising videos, or even not compromising videos, but presenting them as compromising, of political personalities just to keep them in line. And he said, I went to Nawaz Sharif and I said, I have these videos, and if you want, I can release them somehow. And Nawaz Sharif, he said, looked at me and said, don't you have sisters or daughters? And if you do, you wouldn't do this. So you're not going to do it. So that shows the moral side of his bourgeoisie upbringing.
I mean, the way you've characterized him has been quite positive. Could you tell me a little bit about his weaknesses too, as you sort of perceived them?
Well, quite clearly, he allowed his family to profit from his position. And there's enough evidence of that in the Panama Papers, and just by the fact that he has established himself in real estate in a city like London. Of course, his explanation probably will be that he made a good deal of money from a steel mill that he had set up when he was in Saudi Arabia. So it's very hard to pin him down on that. And in fact, the legal cases that were brought against him, and if you remember, he was disqualified because he had been on the board of one of his son's companies. And even though he says he didn't receive any compensation, he was supposed to be receiving compensation. And that led to his disqualification. So I think this is a weakness that he could have controlled his family and maybe kept them out of politics. But I think the urge was to maintain some kind of dynastic control. And the very fact that his daughter is now the chief minister of the Punjab is a good illustration of that. He hopes that the dynasty will continue when Shahbaz Sharif is no longer prime minister.
But in order to ensure her position, it's thought that he had to sacrifice a lot of goodwill and a lot of his own personal legacy as a politician. And therefore, the conclusion that people draw is that this must mean that family is above all the most important thing to him. I don't know what you make of that.
I think it's always been that, and it came down from his father, who always kept the family unit together, and he would hold both the brothers responsible. The other brother, Abbas, was not active in politics. He's passed away now. But Shahbaz and Nawaz Sharif were kept in very tight control by their father. And in fact, he would make sure that whenever an army chief was elected, and it happened with my brother, it happened with General Wahid, who succeeded my brother, that he would bring the two brothers and say to them, and say to the army chief in front of them, that if they give you any trouble, you let me know. So family has been a very tight element in the politics and the personal lives of the Sharif family.
One former PMLN stalwart, who also served as the party's Secretary General, once said to me that for most of Sharif's political career, a candidate associated with him could count on the Nawaz Sharif brand to bring him votes, in other words, as a net positive, but that equation had been reversed, and that now the Nawaz Sharif brand actually takes away votes from a candidate. Do you think that's true?
I don't know enough about today's politics inside Pakistan, but I think in the Punjab, Imran Khan obviously would give him a pretty good fight. But the Sharif network is probably still very strong. And the fact that his daughter is the chief minister, she must be ensuring through entitlements, etc., that potential competitors are kept at bay. So I would say that he continues to exercise an influence. How powerful that influence is on Pakistani politics remains to be seen, because we will have to wait for another quote-unquote free and fair elections, which have not been held in Pakistan since 1970.
Having said that, I mean, observing the last general election, if one could even call it that, in 2024, what was your assessment? I mean, how poorly did the PMLN actually do compared to PTI? I mean, obviously, we will never know because the numbers have been altered very clearly. But do you think this was a catastrophic defeat, as the PTI claimed that it was?
I don't know. I really don't know. I don't have enough information about that. But the previous election, although Imran Khan may claim that he won a resounding victory, was helped in very key constituencies, especially in the Punjab, by the ISI officials who would approach candidates and say to them, you have a choice. You can either not run or run for the PTI. That certainly shifted the balance in favor of Imran Khan in the election when he became prime minister.
Okay, interesting. You've touched on this briefly before, but could you please tell me a little bit more about Nawaz Sharif's attitude towards India and perhaps more broadly, his idea of what foreign policy should be?
I think he's had a very good, strong relationship with the Arabian Peninsula over the years, and that may have also been strengthened by his presence in exile in Saudi Arabia. And so he has retained that relationship and built on it, and his family continues to build on that relationship. With India, he clearly had the mindset of a businessman, that he saw trade as being a net positive for both India and Pakistan. And there was a time briefly when even the military was prepared to go along with it. But if you remember, President Zardari was then in the office of the president, and the elections were coming up. I think it was the 2013, 2014 elections. I forget the exact year. But in the December of the previous year, the Punjabi supporters of the PTI went to President Zardari and said, "You can't allow this thing to open up. We're going to be killed by Indian imports, particularly of agricultural products. And if you want to win the election, you have to stall this." And apparently, on the basis of that reported conversation, President Zardari deferred the decision and said that the next government should take that decision. And so the opportunity was lost. Similarly, if you go back to the earlier period of Musharraf in 1999, when he launched the surreptitious operation in Kargil, that had been on the books, as have been many other plans that the Director General Military Operations comes up with. And that Benazir had shot down once in a meeting where Musharraf, as a div commander, was presenting the case. And she kept saying, "What will happen after that? And what will happen after that?" And he ran out of answers. So the matter was laid to rest. Well, it was revived in that period when Musharraf took over, and he wanted to show something. But it was at complete odds with the peace initiative that Prime Minister Sharif had launched with India. And if you remember, there was a famous bus trip to Lahore and the signing of the Lahore Declaration. And behind the scenes, the military was doing something else. And so that led to a very serious rift between the army chief and the prime minister. And if you remember, the prime minister took his entire family with him to Washington, D.C., and they were put up at Blair House to meet Clinton to see if Clinton could somehow save the situation. And Clinton came through. According to the account by Bruce Rydell, he came through. Otherwise, the Sharif family would have stayed outside the country. But that didn't settle the matter. The military continued to think that there was now no reconciliation possible, and that led to the coup in October 1999.
Could you explain his third ouster? How much of a role the military played in it, and why he was removed?
I really don't have enough information about that, except for what has appeared in the public, that there appeared to be grounds for disqualification. And as you know, the judiciary in Pakistan has not covered itself with glory and are always willing to bend towards the seat of power. And if the military was involved in any way in influencing their decision, then that's probably maybe the reason for why he got disqualified. And when he was allowed to leave the country, there must also have been an understanding that he wouldn't come back. Because he was allowed to
I've only got two more questions for you, if you'll indulge me. The first one is, how does Nawaz Sharif compare to Shehbaz Sharif as a political operator, and in terms of their outlooks? What are perhaps the similarities and what are the differences?
Well, I have seen Shahbaz Sharif work up close and have met with him and his leadership, his bureaucratic leadership when he was Chief Minister of the Punjab. I found him very hands-on. I also found him very open and very similar to his elder brother in trying to open up the borders with India and then also try and maybe open up the borders with Afghanistan to create a link to Central Asia. So he continues to have a regional vision. I think Nawaz Sharif probably planted this idea in Shahbaz Sharif's head, but he was less hands-on. And I said he delegated a lot, and depending on who he delegated to, you either had results or you didn't. He also tried to keep on side a number of the remnants of the Zia regime by allowing the sons of the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and former DG ISI to be part of his party, by aligning with Ijaz ul Haq, the son of General Zia ul Haq. And so I think they had their own reasons for wanting to be seen as conduits to the military, even though they may or may not have had the influence or the information as far as GHQ was concerned. And I think that was a weakness of his. Shahbaz, it appears, seems to have a direct relationship with the army chief and now the chief of defense forces. And so long as this, what I call a misalliance and a marriage of unequal partners continues, I think he'll be able to survive. But if there is any conflict at any point, then obviously the more powerful partner will be the one making the decisive moves.
Finally, then, how will history remember Nawaz Sharif? What do you think his legacy will be?
I think it'll see the opportunities missed, and it will see a confusing desire on the one hand to establish a political system that would be sustained over time with a desire to feed the requirements of the military in order to buy their loyalty and support. And there's only, and it only goes so far. And I think each time that he made a mistake, it was when the military decided that he was more a liability than an asset, and that there were others that would serve their purposes better.
Okay. Shuja Nawaz, thank you so much for your time. Thanks for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you, Hasan Ali.